Hello friends, welcome to the Viva Voce of Anatomy. Now we will see today the Norma Lateralis. That is the lateral external view of a skull. First we discuss the bones which are seen in the Norma Lateralis. You can see the bones, the frontal bone, nasal bone, maxilla, zygomatic. This is the greater wing of the sphenoid. The part of a greater wing of a sphenoid, the parietal bone, the squamous part of a temporal bone, behind it the mastoid part of a temporal bone, and the occipital bone posteriorly, and the mandible bone. Okay. Now we see the feature of a Norma Lateralis. First, the temporal line. The temporal line start from the frontal process of a zygomatic bone. Now it cross the temporal line, cross the frontal bone, passes upwards and the backwards, crosses the coronal suture and reach on the parietal bone. On reaching the parietal bone, this temporal line is divided into the superior temporal line and the inferior temporal line. Now you can see the superior temporal line will fades at a posterior part of the parietal bone, but the inferior temporal line will continue forward and the downwards to become continuous with the supramastoid crest, and the supramastoid crest anteriorly continues with the posterior end of a zygomatic arch. So this is a temporal line. The second part is a zygomatic arch. The zygomatic arch is a horizontal bar which lies on the lateral side of the skull. Right? Now it lies in front of the external acoustic meatus. Now how it forms? The zygomatic arch is formed by anterior 1/3 is formed by the temporal process of a zygomatic bone, and the posterior 2/3 is formed by the zygomatic process of a temporal bone. Now this zygomatic arch is having the upper border, lower border, medial surface and the lateral surface. The anterior end of a upper border is known as a jugal point, right? Now the posterior end of a zygomatic arch, which is also known as a zygoma. Now this zygoma is attached to the squamous part of a temporal bone laterally by the two roots, anterior root and the posterior root. Now these two roots are seen clearly at a Norma basalis here. You can see this posterior end of the zygomatic arch. This is the anterior root and this is the posterior root. Okay, and these two roots are attached medially with the squamous part of a temporal bone. Now the anterior root, it passes in front or anterior to this articular fossa, which is also known as a mandibular fossa, that articulate with the head of a mandible to form the TM joint, temporomandibular joint. Whereas the posterior root will form the lateral margin of an articular fossa, right? Now you can see at the juncture of the anterior root and the posterior root, there is one elevation. This elevation is known as an articular tubercle, the articular tubercle. The one more tubercle that lies in the posterior part of a articular fossa is a postglenoid tubercle. Postglenoid tubercle. The next part in the Norma Lateralis is the external acoustic meatus. This one. It is the external bony opening of a ear. Now how it formed? The external acoustic meatus, its anterior, inferior and the lower part of the posterior wall is formed by a tympanic plate. You can see this triangular plate is a tympanic plate, right? Whereas its posterior-superior part, upper part of the posterior wall and the superior wall, it is formed by the squamous part of a temporal bone. So this is the formation of external acoustic meatus. Now see the posterior-superiorly to the external acoustic meatus, you can see this triangular area. This is called as a suprameatal triangle. The boundary of the suprameatal triangle, in front it is formed by the posterior-superior wall of an external acoustic meatus. Above it is formed by the supramastoid crest, and the behind it is formed by the vertical tangent which passing through the posterior margin of an external acoustic meatus, suprameatal triangle. Now the antero-inferior part of a suprameatal triangle will show the small elevation. This is known as a suprameatal spine, right? So this is external acoustic meatus. The next part is the mastoid part of a temporal bone. The mastoid part of the temporal bone lies posterior to the external acoustic meatus. Now, anterosuperiorly, this mastoid part of the temporal bone is continuous with the squamous part of a temporal bone. And between these two parts, there may be very fine and thin temporomastoid suture may be present, but here it cannot be seen, right? Now this mastoid part of the temporal bone posterior-superiorly articulate with a parietal bone, posterior inferior part of the parietal bone and parieto-mastoid suture. This is the parieto-mastoid suture, okay? And the most posteriorly, this mastoid part of the temporal bone articulate with the occipital bone at a occipito-mastoid suture. Now this parieto-mastoid suture and the occipito-mastoid suture, laterally it is united with another suture which is known as the lambdoid suture that we learned in the Norma Occipitalis. Okay. So the junction of these three sutures, parieto-mastoid, occipito-mastoid and the lambdoid suture, this point is known as the asterion. Now the asterion is a site of the membranous cap in the fetal skull, which is known as a mastoid fontanelle or posterolateral fontanelle, and this will fuse at the age of a 12 month of a life. The clinical importance we have discussed in the bregma and the lambda that will form the anterior and the posterior fontanelle. So that is then applied for the mastoid fontanelle. Now another part in the mastoid part of the temporal bone is this process. This is the mastoid process. It is a nipple-like process which is project forwards and the downwards, just behind the external acoustic meatus. Mastoid process. Now the mastoid process anteriorly in its base, it will separate it from this tympanic plate at a tympanomastoid fissure. You can see this fissure in the Norma Lateralis, this one, tympanomastoid fissure, right? The posterior surface of the mastoid process will present one notch. This is known as the mastoid notch. And the last, this mastoid part will present one foramina, that is a mastoid foramina that lies near the occipito-mastoid suture. Mastoid foramina. Okay. So this is the mastoid part of temporal bone. The next part, the styloid process. The styloid process, you can see here in this one, you cannot see the styloid process, it has been drawn. But here, the styloid process is a needle-like thin process which is directed forward and the downwards, lies anteromedial to the mastoid process. Anteromedial to the mastoid process. Okay, it will arise from the Norma Lateralis. Okay, and its base is encapsulated by the tympanic plate. Right, styloid process. Now the next part in the Norma Lateralis, the important part, the temporal fossa. This is the temporal fossa, the bone. The boundary of the temporal fossa, above it is bounded by the temporal line. Okay, temporal line. Below laterally it is formed by the upper border of the zygomatic arch laterally, and the medially by the infratemporal crest of a greater wing of a sphenoid. Infratemporal crest of a greater wing of a sphenoid. So this is the upper and the lower boundary. The anterior wall. The anterior wall of the temporal fossa is formed mainly by the zygomatic bone, part of the frontal bone, and the part of the greater wing of the sphenoid. This anterior part in the zygomatic bone, it will present the small foramina, this one. It might not be seen clearly, but here lies one foramina that is called a zygomatico-temporal foramina. Zygomatico-temporal foramina. Okay. Now, the most important part in the temporal fossa. This is the floor of the temporal fossa. In the floor, towards the anterior part, you can see this circle, marked circle. Here you can see the edge-shaped suture. This edge-shaped suture is formed by the frontal bone, meeting point of the frontal bone, parietal bone, greater wing of the sphenoid, and the squamous part of a temporal bone. Okay. This edge-shaped suture is known as a pterion. Now, the clinical importance of a pterion is that deep to the pterion in the cranial cavity here lies the ascending branch of a middle meningeal artery, middle meningeal vein, and the stem of a lateral sulcus of a brain. Now, the pterion is a site where the skull bone is very thin. So, if the blunt blow occurred to this pterion region, sometimes in the road traffic accidents. So this part is damaged. So its underlying structure, mainly the middle meningeal artery, may get ruptured, right? So when it ruptures, it will produce the hematoma and the clot formation outside the durameter. That is called as an extradural hematoma. Extradural hematoma. And this extradural hematoma sometimes will create the pressure to the underlying brain tissue, and this will lead to the paralysis of a body on the opposite side. Okay, so this is the clinical importance of a pterion. Now this temporal fossa is communicated below with the infratemporal fossa through this wide gap. Now we see the attachment of a Norma Lateralis. First, the temporal fascia. Temporal fascia is attached above to the temporal lines and the area between the temporal lines. Okay. Below, it will get attached to the inner and the outer border of lips of upper border of the zygomatic. Second, the temporalis muscle. Temporalis muscle will get originate from the temporal fossa, and it is converted into the tendon which will passes through this wide notch. The third, the masseter muscle. Masseter muscle arises from the lower border and the medial surface of a zygomatic arch, the masseter. The fourth, lateral ligament of a temporomandibular joint is attached to the articular tubercle. The fifth, the posterior and the lateral surface of this mastoid process provides insertion of sternocleidomastoid, splenius capitis, longissimus capitis from before backwards. Next, this mastoid notch gives origin to the posterior belly of a digastric muscle. So these are the attachment of a Norma Lateralis. Now we see the structure passing through the foramen. First, this wide gap medial to the zygomatic arch. This will passes the tendon of our temporalis muscle, and deep to the temporalis, deep temporal nerves and vessels. Second, tympanomastoid fissure passes auricular branch of a vagus nerve. The mastoid foramina already discussed passes the meningeal branch of occipital artery and the emissary vein. And the small foramina on the inner surface of a zygomatic bone, here temporal surface, zygomatico-temporal nerve and the minute artery. So this is all about a Norma Lateralis. Thank you.
If you like this video, like it and share with your friends. And to get the regular update on the anatomy videos, please subscribe to our channel and click on the bell icon.